about the nature of leadership and the challenges leaders face today. He spoke last month at the University of Chicago. Mr. Jenkins is a high school teacher in Missouri, an ordained minister, and the author of several publications on education and leadership. He worked with the Reverend Martin Luther King during the civil rights movement of the 1960s.
Our first speaker has made a name for himself in many different careers. As an ordained minister, William Jenkins has preached to congregations throughout the country, including recently at Dexter Avenue King Memorial, the former church of Dr. Martin Luther King. He is the author of many books on leadership and education, and also teaches high school in St. Louis, Missouri. From the day I met him, Mr. Jenkins has been a constant mentor to me. I refused to submit my college applications without his approval, and even sought his guidance to sort out disagreements I had with former girlfriends, prompting my college roommate to say, "How can you take advice on your love life from someone you call Mr.?" What I learned from this man changed my life, and I only hope that through listening to him today, you can gain some of the insights he has shared with me over the past 10 years. It gives me the pleasure to introduce to you a great educator, a great friend, and a pretty good center fielder in his day, Mr. William Jenkins.
He's come a long way from Parkway North High School, prompting me to say in the words of Shakespeare, "Upon what meat doeth this our Caesar feed, that he has grown so tall?" I am honored and frightened to be here today to speak with you on leadership. I did not know that I would be leading off the leadership conference, but those are the things that leadership gets you into. I am somewhat, well, as I told people that I was coming to the University of Chicago, everybody had comments to make about you. And those comments were flattering to the degree that they were intimidating. They told me about how smart you were, and that you were the smartest people in the country, if not the world. And I was asked to come to talk about leadership to the smartest people in the world. I've never been considered as one of the smart people in the world because I was dumb enough to lead people. That's not an easy chore. But I thought, what would I talk about to the smartest people in the world about leadership? And then I remember a story I heard years ago about some smart young men who went up into a mountain to do some mountain climbing and exploration. And they were assigned an old man to guide them. And on a particular evening before their first trek into the mountain, they stayed in the cabin. And the next morning, about 4 o'clock, they got up to get dressed to go out on their journey. And the old man got up also. And they said to him, "Why are you up this early morning?" He said, "Well, I'm going out with you." And they said, "Oh, we don't need you to go out with us. We know about the mountain. We have maps and diagrams, and consequently, we will be able to find our way, so you will not necessarily need to go with us." And he insisted, "Well, I'd like to go because there are things about this mountainous terrain that might be difficult for you to figure out on the spot, and it would be nice to have some guidance." And they said, "Oh, no. You don't need to go with us. We have it all mapped out. We know." And some might have said, "We're from the University of Chicago. We have it all mapped out." So he went back to bed and got some more sleep, and they went into the mountain and did fairly well. Their charts were accurate. They found all of the things they said they were looking for, and came back in the evening, as young people will, glowing in excitement that they had found their way through the first day. And the next morning came, and he got up again, and they said to him, "We found our way yesterday, and we can find our way today." And they went back and found their way to the mountain. Well, on the third day, this man got up with them, and they said, "We told you yesterday, we told you today before, that we don't need your guidance. We have diagrams. We have everything mapped out perfectly. This is a good situation. We've studied this in class. We don't need you to go with us. It's all on the map." And then the man said to them, "The fog is not on the map. It's foggy out there this morning." So since I've been around a little longer than you all have been around, and I might not know as much, I have some experience with the fog that you may not have. And just to tell you a little bit about how to find your way in the fog, I have come here this morning. And I hope that you will not be too dismayed by my comments. And I am not the keynote speaker. She will come later, and I will try to keep my comments away from the area that she will probably discuss. But I just want to compliment you on the fact that you are still interested in leadership. It is a high calling. And there are questions about leadership, and some of the questions are, where do leaders come from? Are they born or are they developed? And I'm sure that you will have a lot of discussion, or have had a lot of discussion about it. Are leaders born? Do they just come naturally, full-grown, onto the scene and say, "I'm ready to lead you"? Or are they developed? I think that leaders are born, but not born the way you think of born. Leaders are born out of their times. Times call for leaders. Times beckon people to come forth to address the issues of the time. Time, your time, will call upon you to do certain things. Your time will demand of you certain skills and competencies. Your time will demand of you certain direction and purpose. Your time will make demands on you. And it really doesn't depend totally on what your intentions were the day before the time's call. You may not be interested in a particular cause or direction, but if your times tap you and call you, then you are placed in a position to lead. Years ago, when I was in high school, there was a woman, and I was in high school during the height of the civil rights movement that I later became very actively involved in. There was this woman that I went to hear speak. I went to an auditorium in my hometown of Greenville, Mississippi, and I sat in the back. I was a high school student, and I saw this black woman come out on stage. Her name was Fannie Lou Hamer, a veteran of the civil rights movement. She was a sharecropper, and she was driven from her home and beaten. And she had gotten involved in the civil rights movement as a result of her own experiences. And that night, she came to speak. And there I was, a high school student, sitting there, listening to this woman talk. And of course, she was from the cotton fields, and her language was not refined. Her verbs were not always in the right place. And I sat there very critical that night and thought that she was not a good speaker. and that maybe she did not really have what it took to play the role that she was playing. A few years later, however, I was a student at Jackson State University, and very close to us there was a college, Tougaloo College, and Fannie Lou Hamer was speaking there. And I went to hear her again. My, how she had grown in the 3 or 4 years since the last time I had heard her. That woman stood there on the stage, refined in every way, developed in every way, and looked out on that audience of young men and women and said to them, well, son, life for me ain't been no crystal stair. It's had text in it and boards torn up and places with no carpet on the floor and bare. But all the times I's been a-reaching landings and turning corners and sometimes going in the dark where there ain't been no light. So, son, don't you give up. Don't you sit down on the steps because it's been kind of hard. Because I's still going, honey. I's still reaching on. And life for me ain't been no crystal stair. Fannie Lou Hamer had been born of the time. She had been developed. She had been refined. She had been sharpened. She had become the leader that we needed at that time. What is leadership? Who are leaders? Leadership is what leadership does. When Tom was in high school, he was a leader, so he said. We were working on an essay to get him into one of the great universities. And one of the things he wanted to stress was his leadership skills. And he blatantly and boldly put it in the paper, I am a leader. And I had to approve all of these things that he was sending off to the schools. And I don't approve things until I'm pleased that they are exactly as I think they should be. As a matter of fact, Tom's father, who is Dr. Howland, and he had a brother to graduate from Stanford, and they were working with him one night on one of these essays. And his dad was tired and exhausted from a day of ministry, and he said to Tom, you know, this is the way it should be. So Tom said to him, well, it can't be mailed until Mr. Jenkins says it can be mailed. Well, his dad was about tired anyway. And he said, well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to bed, and you and Mr. Jenkins can mail this anytime you all get ready. So this essay we were working on, he kept putting this stuff in there about leadership. And I said, why are you putting this in there? He said, because I'm a leader. I said, and you're going to tell them that? He said, yes, I think they ought to know. And I said, well, why do you think you are a leader? And he went on to tell me, well, I'm the captain of the basketball team. I'm president of the tea club. I'm a leader. I said, why don't you just leave out that thing about, that sentence that says, I'm a leader, and just put the things that you do. If you put the things that you do, the people who know about leadership will see your leadership in those things. Leadership is what leadership does. If you're really a leader, it will all come out in your activities. Now, because Tom helped put this conference together, maybe he is a leader. After all, leaders are people who see the future and attempt to take us there. They have this idea of what life is like beyond the present and beckon us to come and go with me. I heard one of the Kennedy brothers say at his dead brother's funeral that some men see things as they are and ask why. He saw things as they never were and ask why not. Leaders ought to see things as they never were and beckon us to come and make them so. Leaders ought to have dreams of places beyond our imagination, because after all, the dreamers are the saviors of the world, the architects of heaven, the makers of the afterworld. The world is beautiful because they have lived, and without them laboring, humanity would perish. So leaders are these people with these dreams of what life is like beyond us. Leaders are people who dreamed of flying when only birds could do it. The Wright brothers had to dream of that. Leaders are people who dream that machines could do the things that men had to do. It took a dream to envision the computer. I find it fascinating what dreamers in business dream up, the gadgets that they come up with, the things that they make to make life better for us. Leaders are people who see the future and beckon us to come with them and follow their dreams. Leaders are people who care enough to sacrifice, to lead. Now, I talked about the fog earlier. I mentioned the fog, and one of the things that the fog hides is the difficulty of the journey. And it's a good thing that the fog hides the difficulty of the journey. Because if you knew from the outset all of the hills and valleys of leadership, you would not start the journey. It's good that you don't know. Some of you naive beginners, it is good that you don't know what's out there. Because if you knew, well, I shouldn't tell you. But I must tell you that you need to care. You need to make the sacrifices, because there are going to be some sacrifices. And you can't make the sacrifices if you don't care. You need to care enough about the people to lead. You need to care enough about the things that are important to you to lead. Because the leaders stay. You know, sometimes people think, many of you eventually want to own your own businesses. Some people have a naive assumption that when you own your own business, you get to work when you want to. To own your own business means that you work all the time and get paid for all of your work. It means that you don't mind putting in 16 hours a day and working 2 or 3 hours after everybody else has gone home. You need to care in order to do such things. Now I will skip some comments and come to the end of my presentation. Leaders are people who feel big enough to tackle the problems of their day. One of the great challenges of leadership in these times is that our problems are so big, so monumental, and we seem so small. Oh, there was a time in our history when we had simpler problems, when things were less complicated. They did not have the great variety of impacts as they do now, and it was pretty simple to take a solution and go forward with it. Now it's not so simple. Problems are so big, and we are such infinitesimally small people when put against the problem that we have. And sometimes the problem diminishes us, and we think, certainly not me. Certainly I do not have anything to offer that could solve that problem. The job is just too big. Who am I to think that I could tackle such a problem? I know how that feels. I was invited to speak at the church that Martin Luther King pastored. And when I was first invited, it seemed like a natural thing. I'd lectured all over the country. I'd written books. I talked about Martin Luther King. I've done Martin Luther King banquet lectures. I've written about Martin Luther King. It seemed like a natural thing that I'd be invited here to that church. But as the event drew closer, the magnitude of it began to sink in. And on the night before the presentation, I began to think of Martin Luther King and who he was and who I am. I began to think of this man who had gone all over the country and the world, and everybody who was living at the time had heard his voice. Everybody had heard him say that I have a dream that men would be judged by the content of their character, not by the color of their skin. I have a dream. Everybody had heard him say that. And these people, some of them still in the congregation, had heard him uttering such things as, let justice run down like water and righteousness like a mighty stream. They were still there. I was asked to go there and stand where he stood and talk to people whom he had talked to, people who still remembered what he said, how brilliant he was, how eloquent he was, how powerful he was. They still remembered those baritone bellowing of beatitudinal beauties that came from his lips on Sunday morning. They still remembered that. And I was to go there and stand in his place and talk. I felt diminished, awfully small. I tossed and turned that night. And the next morning, when I was taken to the church, there it was. People standing outside, folk from all over the world come there to worship. I was ushered in. And one of the deacons shook hands with me and said, we'd honored to have someone of your stature to come. And eventually, not like here this morning, the choir sang, gave me time to collect myself. And I walked out, and there they were. There they were, waiting. And I thought to myself, just say what you know to say. You have earned this. You are big enough for the occasion. Those people out there need to hear the message that you have to deliver. You have something to offer to this crowd. Just say it. You're here now. Just leave. This morning, as I got ready to come here from that fabulous hotel, everything just right. Telephones everywhere, unfortunately. Unfortunately, they were not working until I made several calls downstairs. And this morning, when I got up and I looked out of my window, and I'm a little bit leery of heights, I looked out and there was Chicago, all of this magnificent city. And I thought, I have to go and speak to these smart people. I seem so small. These hands picked cotton in Mississippi years ago. Don't feel sorry for me. I'm doing well now. America works for me, too. This is a great country. So, and I came out, and finally we got to breakfast, and someone said, what it is that do you do? And I said, I teach school. And there was some silence. And they said, what part of the business school are you in? And I said, I'm not in the business school. And there was more silence. And said, what do you do? I said, I teach school. He said, where do you teach? I said, I teach high school in St. Louis. And there was silence. And the people were kind of wondering, what will a high school teacher be doing here, this great school, these smart people talking about business? So they said, are you in business? I said, no, not really. Well, I thought about it on my way here, and I will tell you why I'm here and what business I have here. I am in business. I am in the business of building a better world. That is what I do. When I worked with Tom years ago, my interest was building great citizens to build a better world. I'm in the business that Jeremiah was in. I'm in the business that Socrates was in. I'm in the business that Jesus was in. I'm in the business that Churchill was in. I'm in the business that Roosevelt was in. I'm in the business that King was in. I'm in the business of building a better world. One citizen at a time. I hope that that's what you will be in the end. When you finish, when you build the monuments that you're going to build, when you build the great businesses that you're going to build, when you come forward with the great and new ideas that you're going to come forward with, that in the end, what you will do is build a better world. Come, my friends. 'Tis not too late to seek a new world. Push off. I'm sitting well in order to fight the sounding furrows. For my purpose hold beyond, to sail beyond the sunset and the baths of all the western stars until I die. It might be that the gulfs will wash us down. It might be that we shall see the great Achilles whom we knew. Though much is lost, much abides. And though we have not the strength which in former days moved earth and heaven, that which we are, we are. One equal temper of heroic hearts made weak by time and fate, but strong in will, to strive, to seek, to find, but not to yield. Thank you. No. I